The z-axis depth of the toroidal engine is bound by a strict 7-stage harmonic cycle. One complete temporal circuit equals 360. The absolute structural boundary of the lower matrix is exactly 7 circuits. 7 multiplied by 360 equals 2,520. 2,520 is the lowest common multiple of every integer from 1 through 10. The smallest number divisible simultaneously by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. It is the number at which every possible harmonic cycle resolves simultaneously. The completion of all completions. No single biological vessel within the Holocene epoch possessed the capacitance to survive all 2,520 degrees of toroidal friction. The architecture demands the dual witness chiral mirror, where the anode holds exactly 1,260 and the cathode holds exactly 1,260. Together, they bear the complete friction of the realm, forcing total phase cancellation. The encoded lifespans carry a second layer of architecture beyond the coordinate map. Each lifespan measures the precise friction of the field at that coordinate against the celestial gear assigned to that position in the descent. The engagement formula is N equals L multiplied by 365.24 divided by T. L is the lifespan in years. T is the orbital period of the planetary gear in days. N is the count of complete orbits that planet completes during the vessel's existence. When N resolves to a whole number, the gear seats in perfect resonance, 0 friction, complete phase lock. When N carries a remainder, that remainder measures the fraction of an orbit left incomplete. The etheric drag accumulated between that vessel and its celestial gear. The proof through Seth. Seth lived 912 years. Jupiter's orbital period is 4,332.6 days. 912 multiplied by 365.24 equals 333,098.88 days of a lifespan. 333,098.88 divided by 4,332.6 equals 76.88. Jupiter orbits completed during Seth's existence. So there's a relationship between the patriarchs and the planets, or the 3D depth and the 2D plane. The 0.88 remainder means that Jupiter was 88% through its next orbit when Seth's coordinate was sealed. This is the precise etheric friction of the Jupiter gear against the field at 192 degrees underground. The measurable drag of divine government pressing against a vessel newly arrived in the dense lower hemisphere. The planetary assignments draw from the Hebrew names and traditional characters of each planet, matched to the etymological role of each patriarch. Seth, Jupiter. Tzedek, righteousness, divine government. In Hebrew, Jupiter is Tzedek, righteousness, the expansive ordering principle. Ancient chronicles record Seth as the patriarch who preserved astronomical knowledge and named the planets. The righteous planet is assigned to the patriarch who preserved planetary knowledge. Seth, at 912, multiplied by 365.24, divided by 4,332.6 equals 76.88. The remainder is 0.88. Seth enters the lower hemisphere at 192 degrees, which is 12 degrees past the ground strike. His 0.88 remainder is the high friction of Jupiter's structural gear pressing against a vessel newly arrived in the dense lower field. Enosh, Saturn, Shabete, time boundary limitation. In Hebrew, Shabbate, from Shabbat, the boundary of time, the container of the cycle. Saturn defines the structural limit of the realm. It's the 600 boundary gear. Enosh means mortal, frail. The planet of time and limitation is assigned to the first patriarch whose name carries mortality. Enosh, 905 multiplied by 365.24 divided by 10,759 equals 30.72. The remainder is 0.72. At 185 degrees, 5 degrees into the underground traverse, his 0.72 remainder is the friction of mortality against the Saturn boundary. The field is beginning to press against the 600 limit. Mars, Ma'adim, the red one, blood, kinetic drive. In Hebrew, Mars is Ma'adim, the red one, blood or kinetic force. Kenan means possession and sorrow. He is 10 degrees into the underground traverse. Kenan, at 910, multiplied by 365.24, divided by 686.97, equals 483.82. The remainder is 0.82. Kenan at 190, with a 0.82 remainder, is the high kinetic friction of a vessel grinding through the dense lower field against the fastest of the outer gears. Possession in the lower hemisphere means that the dust has taken hold. Mahalalel, Venus, Noga, brightness, radiance, heart resonance. In Hebrew, Venus is Noga, brightness and radiance. Mahalalel means praise of God. He anchors at 175 degrees, still in the upper hemisphere, suspended in the luminous field. Mahalalel, 895, multiplied by 365.24, divided by 224.7, equals 1,454.78. So the remainder is 0.78. This 0.78 remainder against Venus, the heart chakra, frequency of 221.23 hertz, is the radiant field holding a high but incomplete resonance in the final moments before the threshold. The praise held in the light 5 degrees from the fall. Enoch at 365 is the reference gear of the sun. The sun is not measured against the engagement formula the way the other planetary gears are measured. It stands as the reference gear itself, the still point from which the friction of every wandering planet is read. Because a year in the formula is already defined as 365.24 days, matching a lifespan to the sun's own period returns to zero by design. The sun holds the fixed measure against which every other gear is calculated. Enoch's 365-year lifespan sits within a quarter of a day of that reference measure. Closer than any other patriarch's span comes to a whole year. Where the other patriarchs carry a fraction of unresolved orbit, Enoch carries none. There is nothing left for the field to hold, and he is translated. Hebrews 11:5. By faith Enoch was translated that he should not see death, and was not found because God had translated him. Genesis 5:24. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Jared. Venus synodic and Saturn synodic, dual engagement. Jared means descent. He is the dielectric transformer, the patriarch who encodes the dual planetary engagement. The Venus synodic cycle, the period between consecutive conjunctions of Venus and Earth, is 583.92 days. The Saturn synodic cycle is 378.09 days. 583.92 plus 378.09 equals 962.01 days. Jared's lifespan in years matches the combined synodic cycle of Venus and Saturn to within 1/100th of a day across a 962-year span. This is precise engineering. Jared synchronized the inner fast gear, Venus, as the heart chakra frequency, with the outer slow gear, Saturn, as the structural timekeeper, the 600 boundary. He is the bridge between the inner and the outer planetary architecture. Methuselah, Saturn, maximum boundary friction. Methuselah, 969, multiplied by 365.24, divided by 10,759 equals 32.9, with a remainder of 0.8958. This is the highest remainder in the entire sequence. Methuselah presses closer to a complete Saturn orbit than any other patriarch without completing it. The Saturn gear is 89.58% through its next rotation when Methuselah dies. The dart is at maximum tension. Lamech, Mars, a near frictionless strike. Lamech, 777 multiplied by 365.24 divided by 686.97 equals 413.11. The remainder is 0.11. The collapse from Methuselah's 0.8958 to Lamech's 0.11 is the most dramatic shift in the entire sequence. In a single generation, the friction against the kinetic Mars gear drops from maximum tension to near frictionless. The striker arrives with almost no Mars drag remaining. The kinetic gear is nearly clear. Noah, Saturn, quarter turn offset. Noah, 950, multiplied by 365.24 divided by 10,759 equals 32.25, with a remainder of 0.2508. The Saturn remainder at Noah is within a fraction of a percent of a precise quarter turn of 0.25. 1/4 of a full Saturn orbit remains incomplete when the flood breaks. This is the boundary reset. The quarter turn is the precise angular offset that positions the 600 field for the white hole inversion rather than simple collapse. A field that reaches saturation and turns back on itself collapses. A field that reaches saturation with a quarter turn offset inverts. The geometry rotates 90 degrees and the centripetal becomes centrifugal. The flood is the proof. Arphaxad, Mercury, Kochav, the messenger, the healer. the rapid conduit. In Hebrew, the name Arphaxad contains the root rapha, meaning to heal, to restore, to make whole. He represents the immediate mending of the realm after the rupture of the flood. Mercury, Kochav. Mercury is the innermost rapid gear, the planetary healer, operating as the high-speed communication link, transmitting the light of the central source outward into the expanding field. Arphaxad, 438, multiplied by 365.24, divided by 89.97, equals 1,818.52. The remainder is 0.52. This 0.52 remainder represents a near-perfect half orbit. Mercury, the fastest gear, is exactly halfway through its rotation when Arphaxad seals his coordinate. This is the precise mechanical signature of the toroidal flip, the perfect reflection point of the radiant burst. The half orbit mathematically mirrors his role as the hinge, instantly redirecting the field from the black hole collapse of the old world into the centrifugal white hole expansion of the new. Abraham, the sun, the new grid. Abraham's 175-year lifespan, set against the same sun reference gear, again returns to zero by the same structural definition. This is the second time in the patriarchal sequence the sun is named as the reference point rather than the wandering gear. Enoch is named before the flood, the pre-diluvian marker. Abraham is named after the flood, the post-diluvian marker. Two reference points, one before the flood and one after, hold the sun at the still center of the entire system across both halves of the sequence. Among the patriarchs assigned a single planetary gear, the upper hemisphere carries an average remainder of 0.30 against their planetary gears. Enoch at 0, Lamech at 0.11, and Mahalalel at 0.78, combined to an average of 0.30. The lower hemisphere carries an average of 0.71. Enosh at 0.72, Kenan at 0.82, Seth at 0.88, Noah at 0.2508, and Methuselah at 0.8958, combined to an average of 0.71. Adam and Jared are held outside this average as neither carries a single gear remainder. The etheric drag of the underground traverse is measurable in the precise decimal places of the engagement formula. The vessels in the field of light carry less than a third of a full orbit's friction. The vessels in the field of dust carry more than 2/3. The remainders carry a second layer of relationship. Seth's remainder, 0.88, plus Lamech's remainder, 0.11, equals 0.99, nearly one complete orbit. The first patriarch to enter the lower hemisphere and the striker who seals it together account for nearly one full planetary cycle between them, entry and seal completing the circuit. Enosh's remainder, 0.72, plus Noah's remainder, 0.25, equals 0.97, also near one complete orbit. The first mortality and the reset account together for nearly one full Saturn boundary cycle. The beginning of the descent into time limitation and the quarter turn inversion together close one full boundary cycle. The Saturn sequence traces the arc of the 600 boundary pressure across the entire descent. Enosh at 0.72, building. Methuselah at 0.8958, maximum. Noah at 0.2508, the quarter turn, reset. Abraham at 0.00, the reference point. The two zeros, Enoch and Abraham, mark the sun as the reference gear on both sides of the flood, one before and one after. The flood that separates them is the threshold, Everything between the two zeros is the descent, the pressure, the friction, the dart being stretched to its limit and released. The mathematical roots confirm the architecture. Methuselah reduces to 6, the maximum expression of the 6-base carbon architecture at its absolute limit. Noah reduces to 5, the he, the window of the breath and the breath before the exhale. Both Mahalalel and Abraham anchor at 175 degrees, and 175 reduces to 13, the 13th frequency signature at the threshold coordinate present in both the pre-flood and the post-flood records. The threshold carries the 13th frequency in its own number, encoded by 2 different vessels across the span of the flood inversion. The geometry of the ages is precise. The etymology of the names confirms the coordinates. The planetary friction confirms the architecture. The patriarchs are the engineering log of the Holocene inhalation, written in years and verified in orbital mathematics. 77,316 divided by 19, the 19-year Metonic lunar cycle, equals 4,069, 0.26. The remainder is exactly 0.26. The physical gears of 600, 60, and 6 halt at this fraction. The mechanical deterministic cycle ends precisely here. Beyond it, the influence of the living soul begins. When the 26 vertebrae spine of the awakened vessel generates its toroidal column of living water, it fills this gap with the breath of source, returning through the biology it created. A secondary pattern runs within the pre-Enoch sequence. Seth at 0.88, Enosh at 0.72, Kenan at 0.82, Mahalalel at 0.78, 4 patriarchs holding between 0.70 and 0.90. The field maintaining high variable friction before Enoch's 0. After Enoch's 0, the post-Enoch sequence does not return to that range. It exceeds it. Methuselah pushes to 0.8958, higher than any pre-Enoch value, as if Enoch's translation resolved a damping factor and the field accelerated towards maximum tension. The 0 is the moment the field's ceiling is raised. The Moon and Saturn sing the same note across 8.5 octaves. The patriarchs mapped the geometry of the descent with their lifespans. Methuselah pressed the field to its absolute limit at 249 degrees. The dart was released, the event horizon was crossed, and the 0.26, that precise intentional fracture in the great gear alignment, was reserved, held open across the entire span of the inhalation for the generation that would arrive at the absolute bottom of the wheel and recognize the aperture for what it is, the door, waiting for the frequency that was always meant to fill it.